Chapter 9 A True Friend. Jurek found his next family by accident. He had stepped out of his forest to look on the road for some stones for his slingshot. A farmer was sowing in the field, reaching into the sack on his shoulder and casting the golden seeds with a broad, regular movement, as if doing the Lord's work. Fascinated, Jurek walked closer for a better look. It was lunchtime. A woman came from the village to bring the farmer food. Jurek stepped up to them and greeted them. "Are you hungry, boy?" He nodded. "Help yourself," the farmer said. He crossed himself and sat down with them to eat. After putting a few questions to him, the woman turned to her husband and said, "Joseph Wapelniknik is looking for a coward. Shall I take the boy with me to the village?" The farmer nodded. Jurek went with the farmer's wife. The village nestled at the foot of a small hill. On the hilltop were the ruins of an impressively large building, an old fortress, or perhaps a castle. The woman brought him to a big, well-maintained farmhouse and knocked on the door. A somber-looking farmer opened it. "You've been looking for a new coward," the woman said. "I've brought you one." Pan Wapelnik surveyed him. "All right," he said. "I'll try him out. What's your name?" "Jurek Staniak." Jurek was told to wait in the yard. Pan Wapelnik went and brought a wheelbarrow full of food for the pigs and sent Jurek to feed them. When he was done, he found the farmer sitting in front of his house. "You can sleep in the hayloft," he told Jurek. "Tomorrow you'll take the cows to pasture." "Yes, sir." Pan Wapelnik took him to the hayloft and pointed to a blanket in a corner. Someone had bedded down here before him. Shaking the blanket to air it, he heard something fall. He bent down and picked up a pocket knife. He opened it. It had only one blade, the tip of which was broken. He recognized it at once. It was Yoseli's. Was he the coward before him? What had happened to him? He didn't dare ask Pan Wapelnik. Perhaps eventually he would. Yosef Wapelnik was an irritable man. His small, unattractive wife was always busy. They had 3 grown daughters. 2 worked on the farm and helped their mother with the milking. The youngest and prettiest lived in another village and sometimes visited on Sundays. There were also 2 younger children, smaller than Jurek, a boy and a girl. Pan Wapelnik took both of them every morning on horseback to their school in a nearby town. The next day, he rode the horse alongside Jurek to the pasture. He numbered more than 15 cows, and Jurek had to run around a lot to keep them all in the meadow. Once the farmer saw that, he knew what to do. He left him alone with them. At least twice a day, however, he came by to make sure the cows were all right. One day a cow calved in the meadow. Jurek knew exactly what to do. When Pan Wapelnik arrived, he received a nod of approval, the highest praise the farmer ever gave. Pan Wapelnik put the calf on his horse and rode home with the bleeding mother behind him. Jurek didn't play with the village boys. If he wasn't given extra chores after coming home with the cows, he stayed on the farm and played with his dog, a big black and white spotted mongrel with a black ring around one eye, which had turned up one day. Jurek took to feeding it, and the dog came to sleep with him at night in the hayloft. One morning, while he was letting the cows out of their milking stalls, one of them stepped on the dog's front foot. The foot was broken. Pan Wapelnik went to get an axe with which to put the dog out of its misery, but Jurek carried the dog to the hayloft. He straightened the broken leg and made a splint from 2 pieces of wood tied with strips of cotton. The dog couldn't walk. Jurek went on feeding it and sleeping with it at night. Sometimes he brought it milk from the barn. He called it Azor. For many days, Azor hardly moved. Then he began to hobble with his bad leg in the air and tried to work the splint off. Jurek scolded him and tied it back in place. A few weeks went by. When the foot had mended enough for Azor to use it, Jurek took off the splint and massaged it. The dog walked on all 4 legs again, although with a limp. Azor became Jurek's best friend and went with him everywhere. One day the farmer, who had forgotten about the incident, saw the 2 of them together and asked with surprise, "Where's that dog from?" "It's the dog you wanted to kill, Pan Joseph," Jurek said. "It limps a bit, eh? There's no reason it can't make a good guard dog." That night he tied Azor with a chain outside the house. In the morning he let Jurek free him. Only on Sundays did Azor remain chained all day. That was when Pan Wapelnik had visitors. He was proud of his big new guard dog and wanted to show him off. Jurek's new employers never invited him into their house. After coming home with the cows, he would be brought his supper by one of the girls. Usually this was a bowl of noodles and vegetables, or potatoes mashed with lard and onions. On Sundays he was given an omelet with sausage. He was hungry all the time. Although he knew Pan Wapenick wouldn't like it if he took his mind off the cows, one day he couldn't resist hunting a grouse with his slingshot. As soon as the farmer departed after one of his visits, Jurek made a fire and put the grouse in the coals. As luck would have it, Pan Wapenick returned unexpectedly soon afterward. Finding Jurek by the fire, he struck him hard with his whip. "I've got a big herd," he said. "If I ever catch you sitting by a fire again, I'll sack you at once." Yes, Pan Joseph. After the farmer was gone, Jurek ate the cooked grouse, but he didn't dare hunt any more. It was high spring. One fine Sunday morning, Jurek lay in the meadow playing one of his favorite games. Taking off his shirt, he hung it on a board in the sun and waited for the lice to leave it. Then, with the help of a stem, he forced them to walk in a straight line. Any louse breaking ranks was squashed at once. After a while, he laid his head on the ground and fell asleep. Azor was chained up and wasn't with him. He awoke to a stinging pain. Joseph Wapenick was standing beside his horse and whipping him. Jurek leaped to his feet. The cows were gazing in a field of carrots. Before Jurek could run toward them, the farmer seized him and bound his hands with the whip. He was unsteady on his feet and stank of alcohol. Twice he tried mounting his horse and fell off. The third time he succeeded, dragging Jurek after him. Jurek's knapsack and jacket, all the property he owned in the world, remained in the meadow. "Pan Joseph, the cows!" Jurek shouted, but the farmer paid him no attention. He simply mumbled to himself and uttered a string of curses. When they reached the farmyard, he dismounted, or rather fell off his horse, freed Jurek's hands, grabbed him by the hair, and began to beat him with the handle of the whip. Jurek screamed. Azor fought to come to the rescue. On the third leap, he broke the chain and pounced on the farmer. Pan Wapenick let go of Jurek and tumbled to the ground, trying to protect himself with the whip. "Azor, come!" Jurek called in a fright, afraid the dog would murder the man. He began to run. Azor left Pan Wapenick and ran after him. He returned to the meadow, gathered his things, and headed for the forest. As soon as he entered the dark cover of the trees, he felt like someone returning to hometown whose streets and lanes he knew by heart. And now he had a friend with him. The first night, Jurek reverted to his old custom of sleeping in a tree. But Azor soon began to whimper, and he climbed down and lay beside him on the mattress of pine needles. His thoughts turned to Yosel and his knife. Had Yosel also run away because Pan Wapenick beat him? He would never know. He fell asleep and dreamed that something was rolling on him and choking him. He wanted to ask his brother to help him, but couldn't remember his name. Although it was on the tip of his tongue, he couldn't think of it, and when he shouted, his brother didn't recognize his voice and walked away. He knew he would come to him if he called by name, but the name continued to escape him. He woke up breathing heavily. Azor was lying on his chest, licking him. Jurek sat up and stroked the dog's head. It was wet. Jurek licked his lips. He was thirsty. "Did you find water?" he asked. Azor wagged his tail. Jurek listened to the forest. There was the sound of running water. He went to look for the brook that was making it. It made him think of his first day in the forest with the Jewish boys. How long ago had that been? He tried to calculate. Since then, a whole winter and spring had gone by, and it was almost summer again. He went to pick berries for his breakfast. Azor didn't know what to make of them. He ate some and spit out others. Jurek burst out laughing and hugged him. "You'd rather have meat, wouldn't you?" he said. Azor cocked his head and thought, deliberating. Jurek took out his slingshot and strode off purposely through the trees. A bird took off from a branch, sensing danger. But practice had made perfect, and he brought the wood pigeon down. It fell to the ground with a broken wing and made for the bushes. Azor pounced on it. "Fetch, Azor," he ordered as he had done in their games. The dog gave him a sly look. He raised his voice. "Azor." The dog obeyed and brought him the bird. There was not enough meat on it for the two of them. "Still," he said to Azor, giving him the innards and bones, "it's better than nothing." They were still eating when he spied another wood pigeon, perhaps the first one's mate. He downed it too. Now they could eat to their heart's content. The next day, Azor disappeared in the undergrowth, came back, and was gone again. Jurek listened and heard an odd sound, as if of branches being shaken. Following Azor, he discovered a rabbit dangling by its foot from a slip knot. Opening the knot, he removed it from the rabbit's foot. The animal screeched horridly. Jurek was afraid the sound might bring the forester or the trapper, if not worse. The rabbit had to be killed quickly. He did it with his eyes shut and moved away through the forest to be safe. This time he waited until nighttime to make a fire. He cut the rabbit into pieces and roasted them on a spit. Azor ate too. It was a royal feast, and there was enough left over for the next day. Jurek became a good hunter. He bagged a small rabbit, a squirrel, and once, after several misses, a large duck swimming in a reed-encircled pond. Azor, fetch, he called. The dog jumped into the water at once and fetched the duck. There was enough meat for 3 days. Another time, Jurek killed and cooked a blue jay, but its meat was inedible. It was tough and had a bad smell. He gave it to Azor, who didn't think much of it either. They weren't alone in the forest. A growl from Azor would warn them when people were people or wild boar around. Grabbing the dog and pinching his jaws shut with both hands, Jurek would whisper, "Shh," and Azor would hush up. After each such near encounter with what or whom only Azor knew, they hid for a while in the bushes. At night, Jurek lay with his arms around the dog, making sure he didn't bark. Sometimes, hearing low voices or footsteps, he guessed that partisans were near. He debated letting them know he was there, but Yoselis had said they wanted no part of Jewish boys. And then, disaster struck. It was a clear day. Toward noon, he heard voices and people running. Before he could grab Azor and slip away, a large dog bounded toward them. Foaming at the mouth, 2 men with rifles ran after it. They shouted when they saw him. "Mad Dog, run, boy!" Jurek ran as fast as he could. Azor ran after him, bounding over a large fallen tree. Jurek felt a sharp pain in his heel. He ignored it and kept running. The mad dog was gaining on them. He halted, grabbed a large branch, and swung around to face the beast. Azor bared his fangs and threw himself at the attacker. Jurek tried striking the rabid dog on the head, not realizing what danger he was in. The two men came running up. "Get out of the way, boy!" Jurek jumped aside. 2 shots rang out. "No!" Jurek cried. "No!" They fired 2 more shots. The mad dog was dead. Azor lay dying. Jurek slumped to the ground in pain, hugging his dog. He didn't cry. One of the men stroked his head. He pushed the hand angrily away. The man said, "Son, your dog saved your life. But what did you kill him for? Look, we had to kill them both. When a man or dog is bitten by an animal with rabies, they get it too and die a horrible death. Do you understand? Look how your dog has bites all over." Jurek nodded. "Where are you from?" "The village," he pointed vaguely. "Over there?" They looked in the direction he had pointed in. "There's no village there. You're confused. You must mean there." They pointed somewhere else. Jurek nodded. The 2 men talked things over and decided to burn the dead dogs. One went to gather pine needles and the other dry branches. Jurek tried helping them, but he couldn't step on his injured foot. "What happened to you?" one of the men asked. Jurek sat down and looked at his heel. "I must have landed on something when I jumped," he said. He overcame his pain and lent a hand. The men looked tense and nervous. "Would you stay here and watch the fire?" one asked him. Here's 10 zloty. We have to go. If any animal eats the carcass before it's burned, the rabies will spread. Do you understand?" Jurek understood. He didn't take the money. "All right," he said. He sat and watched the fire. The smoke burned his eyes. Tears ran from them. Someone was standing there. Jurek looked up. The man lifted an arm to hit him. When he saw what was burning, though, he checked himself. It was a forester, a different one from the one Jurek knew. "What are you doing?" he asked. Jurek told him. 2 men with rifles, you say?" "Yes." "Not Germans, not police?" "No." The forester nodded thoughtfully. He asked, "Where are you from?" This time, Jurek pointed in the right direction. "Go home," the forester said. "I don't want you burning down this forest. I'll take care of the fire myself." That night, Jurek went back to sleeping in the trees. He tied himself to a branch with his rope belt and dreamed of Azor. In his dream, Azor could climb trees and was lying next to him. Then, Azor turned into his brother. They were sleeping together in one bed, but his brother slept badly and kept kicking him in the foot. Jurek awoke. Dawn was breaking. The forest floor beneath him was still dark. His foot felt worse. By evening, he could hardly walk. 2 more days went by, and his heel swelled and turned yellow with pus. The skin was too calloused to pierce with the pine needle, and was afraid to cut it with Yosel's knife. He needed help. Breaking off a branch to use as a walking stick, he hobbled in the direction the 2 armed men had pointed. When he came to the village, he remembered the pretty woman's advice and headed for the spire of the church. Next to it was a horse, and he knocked on the door. An old priest opened it. Jurek greeted him in the name of Jesus. The priest reached out to pat his head, and he kissed the priest's hand as he had seen people do in village streets. "You're not from here," the priest said. "No, Father." "Where are you from?" "I have no parents. I just go from place to place." "What can I do for you, my son?" Jurek showed the priest his foot. The priest looked at the swollen heel and told Jurek to come in. He went to a closet, took a razor blade, and cut the thick skin on Jurek's heel. Then he squeezed out the pus, wiped it away with a clean rag, and pulled out a long splinter. Finally, he smeared salve on the heel and bandaged it. "Martha," he called, "bring some bread and milk. We have a young guest." A middle-aged woman entered the room and put on the table a large glass of milk and a plate with 2 thick slices of bread and lard. Jurek reached for it, remembered in time to cross himself, and began to eat. Although he tried eating slowly and politely, it wasn't easy. The priest sat watching him. From time to time, he shook his head and smiled. "How old are you, my son?" "About 9, Jurek said. The priest asked the usual questions. Jurek answered them. When he was done eating, he asked, "Does anyone around here need a boy to do some work?" "Try the big house. Come, I'll show you where it is." The priest walked him to the churchyard. "Just follow this street," he said, "and if you stay in the village, come back and see me again." "I will, Father." The priest blessed him, and Jurek limped off. Leaning on his stick, a group of boys was playing rag soccer in the street. He would have joined them if not for his foot. They stopped their game to watch him go by. He heard a boy say, "See that blonde kid? I know him. He used to play with us when I visited my cousins." The boy added something in a whisper. "Go on," said a second boy. "I just saw him come from the priest." "I'm telling you, it's true," the first boy insisted. Jurek kept walking without hastening his stride. When he reached the end of the village, he continued as fast as his foot allowed him to. Now and then he turned around to look. No one was following him. He had never heard anyone call him "that blonde kid" before. He had always been Red. The sun had bleached his hair without his knowing it.